Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz. This is second time I'm making this video because the first time when I reviewed it, it turned out I had the entire video on mute and I was not able, uh, our video gone to waste because I did not check to see that I have unmute unchecked. So that was my fault. I'm beginning the video where I left off with Prophet Joseph and Jacob. It's the same kind of point you will say where Joseph, upon in peace, was thrown into the prison. And here we see that Moses, upon in peace, is at the same junction. Because you look at the junction point in the Quran, because you'll see different prophets on similar junction points and how each is being guided to respond. Given the context of their situation, the context of what Moses was facing is different than the context of what Joseph, upon them peace, was facing. So in both situations, you could see, though, there are some similarities, and this is where you get, again, that understanding of turning to God. So he prays to God, he turns to God. Oh, my Lord, save me from people given to wrongdoing. Here, Moses, upon in peace, accidentally kills one of the soldiers of the Pharaoh. I use the term here Egyptian because they're Egyptians, but we're talking about thousands of years ago, not to be confused with current day Egypt and Egyptians. Similarly, when we speak about the children of Israel, not to be confused with the modern day state of Israel. This is about a story that God tells us in the Quran for us to extract lessons that we can reflect on that take place in our own lives. And it teaches us how to see and interpret the world, as well as interpret our stories, as well as interpret the stories of others around us. So he turns to God, just like Joseph, upon peace. He turns to God. He accidentally kills a man. Now the entire kingdom of the Pharaoh is plotting and planning to kill him. He was given advice to get out, go, because you're going to be killed by the Pharaoh. So he turns to God, save me from people given to wrongdoing. Then when he turned his face towards the land of the Midian, he said, I do hope that my Lord will show me the smooth and straight path. Now you can go in more detail, scholarly commentary of the Quran for this verse and look at more than one scholarly commentary. But here I'm looking at it to extract how or what we can understand from current day events using this particular passage of the Quran. The land of the Midian was inhabited by Arabs. Some commentators say the Arab prophet Shu'aib was in the town, while others say it was the esteemed believer known as the English language Bible as Jethro, or Yathra in Arabic. Although Midian was not a utopia, as no place is, it was a place where Moses could live in relative freedom. But it took Moses some time to reach this freedom. When Moses arrived in Midian, he had been traveling for 8 days, driving himself to the limits of exhaustion. He reached a point of starvation with his feet bleeding from walking tirelessly without water or food except what he could find on the trees. He came near a well and fell underneath the shade of trees for shelter. He had absolutely nothing with him, and he had fully exhausted himself to the very depths of his body and soul in pursuit of survival. It was not an easy experience in that state. Try to imagine like what you would do. Some would, day after day, you're facing like an existential threat. It's not like you're thinking imaginary, you're facing it, you're living it, existential threat. Some might commit suicide, others might go on a shooting rampage or otherwise try to numb their feelings and escape from the pain and fear of this difficult new reality. Moses, on the other hand, experienced and accepted the event, again, turning to God with that event. He surrendered to his new reality, since this was where God had brought him. Then, in a state of dire need and exhaustion, remember the state he's in when he meets these two women. And it's important to reflect on that because it tells us a lot about the previous situation that he was in, the persecution that he was facing, the fact that he escaped persecution before he came to this watering well. He saw two women who were also needy. Instead of being absorbed with his own near starvation and exhaustion, Moses got up, approached him, and asked a clarifying question. But remember, we don't see people as they are, we see them as we are. And then he addressed their need. He asked them for nothing in return. He made, again, no assumptions or ugly accusations about how they were standing with their flock, instead of allowing a male relative to do the job. Now, we're talking about thousands of years ago. It's uncommon to see like two women standing near a well, which was surrounded all by males, and as they're watering their flocks. So when he arrived at the water of the Midian, he found there a group of men watering their flocks, and beside them he found two women who were keeping back their flocks. He said, "What is the matter with you?" They said, "We cannot water our flocks until the shepherds take their flocks, and our father is a very old man." Therefore, he watered their flocks for them. Then he turned back to the shade and said, "My Lord, truly I am in need, whatever good that you bestow on me." Now, a lot of times people, when they run from persecution, wherever persecution place they're facing, and then they run, you might say we can reflect on this to the land of the Midian. Exchange the land of the Midian to XYZ in this day and age. But when they enter the land of the Midian, what happens is God tests them. And maybe they're not aware of that test, or maybe they're not cognizant of that test, but a test will be brought to them because this tells them something about themselves and about what they've experienced. Here we learn about Moses that his intention when he killed that Egyptian soldier, or again, soldier of Pharaoh, when he killed him, that his intention was pure. He just miscalculated based on, the fact, the divine laws that he had received at the time, and being raised in the environment of oppression under the Pharaoh and the kingdom of the Pharaoh. But his intention was pure. Because usually when people are perverse and they have diseased hearts, if you take them from one environment, it's like a seed, for example, and you put them in another environment, they act the same way. So if somebody has a perverse nature, like they kill someone because they're transgressors, they have no red lines, they have no boundaries, then if you move them from that systematic oppression and you put them in a very good environment, they will still respond in kind. So God tells us that he's pure. He miscalculated, but he really is pure. And so this is, again, a reflection for Zionists who ran from persecution in Europe, and then they came to Palestine. When they entered Palestine, how did they behave? That is the question. Did they behave like Moses, where they turned and they looked at the Bible, or they looked at turning to God and saying, "God, I am in need of whatever good you bestow on me." And then God, who created, remember, we're all properties, we're all instruments of God, who created people in the Middle East, nurtured their soul to promote coexistence. Is this what happened? No, that's not what happened. So this is a turning point, a reflection point for the Zionists and their storytelling. God removed you from the area of persecution, and he placed you in the land of Palestine, similar to when Moses was removed from systematic oppression under the Pharaoh and pushed into the Midian. Did you respond like here? What came out of you tells you what's in your heart, because we're all seeds. We're all seeds. They say they try to bury us and they didn't realize we're seeds. We're all seeds. Problem is, what kind of seed are you? If you're pushed into a healthy environment, what comes out of you? Is it, is this what came out of you when you entered Palestine? Or is what came out of you because when you escaped persecution, is what came out? Did you carry with you the spirit in your heart of the Nazis? And if we listen, then I mentioned it more than once. Israeli leaders in their diaries wrote that they acted like Nazis when they came to Palestine. They acted like Nazis when they came to Palestine. So you can't selectively be looking at the Bible, cut and paste, and cut, paste, and then just kind of weave whatever story you want. Because some of us, we reflect on these things and we know what to look for at that junction point. We are going to reflect on your storytelling and how you try to promote your story. And we're going to push back and say, you ran from persecution, but we're all seeds, and this is not your nature. This did not come out of you. So it's not just the DNA, it's also like the spiritual connection. The spiritual connection between you and the prophets. We did not see that coming out of you. So there's no scientific evidence to connect you with the prophets. There's no scientific evidence to connect you with Solomon, David, and all of the people of thousands of years ago that you claim lived there, and this was their land and they ruled it. And there is no spiritual evidence that you are even in any way, shape, or form connected with the prophets. Here I'd like to reflect on the following name of God, Al-Wahhab. At times we have doors open for us. You can get, you have a job, you have to work. At times, as we're seeing in Gaza, the doors are literally closed by, people. They're closing the borders so that humanitarian aid does not get in. So Al-Wahhab, which means a donor who gives without expecting return, and Al-Muhaymin, or the protector and the guardian. Moses hoped for anything to help him survive. So try to imagine Moses in his state. Again, we're all seeds. And God is telling us, when you squeeze, when you squeeze, what came out of him? He was near starvation, yet he did this good deed for the two women without expecting anything in return. God rewarded Moses as conditional generosity, giving him shelter, food, job, and a family. There is something to notice here. A true leader cannot have a deep-seated prejudice towards women. You can't be, for example, what I'm trying to get at, you can't be protesting being treated, and this is not a way against any group, but just in general, think about it, being treated and subjugated by systematic oppression. At the same time, you look at other people as objects. At the same time, with the strength or the power that God gives you over those who are unprotected from you, you look at them as objects and you exploit them. And this is just for men in general, when we're fighting oppression, because, oppression hits both men and women. How you want, like the police to treat you or the system of power to treat you, you must also treat women in kind. In fact, that was one of the parting words of Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, that he advised him to treat women well. So you can't be mistreating women, treating them like objects, exploiting them. At the same time, you're protesting being treated like objects and being exploited by those who have power over you. This is not, again, making judgment, but we have to nurture our hearts to be able to receive the morals, the insight, the wisdom, teachings from God. A leader or reformer does not violate the boundaries of another human being. That violation cannot also happen mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually. They don't hype others up. They don't overpower others for selfish motives. It's open to embracing and receiving wisdom and knowledge from others. If you have something important that you want to teach, you feel that it has reached you, and you will notice when you study Prophet Muhammad, upon peace and blessings, mission on earth, that he accepted. There were people that came, from other tribes and other cultures, and they came with insight and understanding, and he considered that insight and understanding to build his community, build his nation. Does not fear learning, again, as a Muslim, someone born in Palestine, Jerusalem, Western education, and encourages Western societies not to fear Eastern education. It says in the Quran, "O humankind, we've created you from a male and a female, made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another." We exchange insight, we exchange wisdom, we exchange knowledge, we teach, and we learn from each other. So like Prophet Muhammad, Moses, upon him peace and blessings, was not a tribal leader who promoted tribalism or racism. Now, he was sent to his people. He wasn't sent as a universal prophet, whereas Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, was sent for the universe itself. Not just human beings, but for the universe itself. So he was able to live amongst Arabs in the Midian, to embrace other cultures and to appreciate them. So I want to get us to that point that I was putting on Facebook, and I'll take you to those posts, is to note the woman hinted to her father, seeing how, again, this individual, because he's not just coming in as a rich person, acting and treating them in this way. It's coming as somebody in a dire situation, a very dire need, yet very strong. Remember, he's a very strong person. His strength, he miscalculated when he pushed the Egyptian soldier and miscalculated, ended up killing him. So here, they're noticing, this person is not acting like those people around the well. He's not acting like those individuals around the well. And so they're seeing also trustworthiness from him, how he helped them, how he didn't exploit them, how he didn't harm them, and how he didn't ask for anything in return. And they're noticing like this is something that, again, the beautiful character, just like the woman in the kingdom of Joseph, where I said, I left off before, they noticed that lovely spirit, that lovely character of Prophet Joseph. And so these women also noticed that. So everybody kind of attracts, to what their nature is. They were reared under a prophet tribe. And so they're noticing, obviously, when you're being reared, you teach your children what to look for. Sometimes like you'll show things to, like I have a daughter, you show her, you're like, this person, it's problematic the way that they, communicate. And this person is, more trustworthy, that, they don't treat you in a way, for example, that they would not accept someone to treat their mother, someone to treat their aunt, as the Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, told us, someone to treat their daughter, someone to treat female relatives that they love and they are protective of. They would not treat you in a manner that they would be outraged if someone treated one of their own women. So we hear about like when someone harms a white woman, and they express outrage, societies, which is fine. The problem is not that they're expressing outrage if someone harms a white woman. The problem is that they don't go into reflection mode. And when one of their own oppresses, objectifies, like we have seen with Israeli soldiers constantly, like wearing lingerie and checking the drawers of Palestinian women and trying to their attempt was to humiliate them, but actually humiliated themselves. But they're running around, modeling their lingerie openly. They don't treat other people's women in a way they would not accept someone to treat their woman. So you can't be outraged over October 7th and say, look how they treated our woman. And yet at the same time, you have a history of objectifying, exploiting, and oppressing Palestinian women. That's what I'm trying to kind of get at. Is a person of character is someone who reflects and introspects. Right and wrong doesn't need to be rocket science. You know what you don't like for you. You know what would outrage you somehow someone treats female members of your family. If you're someone who reflects and introspects, that should be sufficient for you as knowledge and wisdom not to treat other people's with. So consider what would enrage you, anger you, or outrage you. What type of actions were done to your woman would make you go upset, and then ask yourself, do you recognize when they are being done against other women by your allies or members of your tribe, and yet you support and you defend and you accept? That's what I'm trying to get at. So they're noticing this is somebody who reflects, somebody who's trustworthy, given how they treated them. And again, similar to how Joseph upon peace treated the other woman. He didn't objectify them. At the same time, he didn't exploit them. Likewise with Prophet Moses. So then came to here after he made the prayer. Remember, when he turned to God, he didn't turn to the woman trying to sell his labor and promote himself. He turned to God. Now God intervenes between person and their hearts. If you turn to God, and these individuals are, good people, God will intervene between you and them and nurture the hearts together. So when you tell people sometime to repent or to feel remorse or to turn to God, what you're literally telling them is, God knows what's in your heart and what's, for example, at a personal level, what's in my heart. If it's in God's knowledge, in God's understanding, because he's the hearing, the all-seeing, the all-knowing, it is within wisdom that we, interact with each other, as a community or as a group of friends, community members, then God will intervene between us in this situation. You see that in the Quran. If each person turns to God with what's in their heart, instead of trying to win an argument and seeking from God to help us resolve issue, then God will nurture that relationship. In this situation, he's turning to God to fulfill his needs. He did not have them in his mind, Moses, but he has needs given the situation that he's in. He turns to God to fulfill his need. At the same time that this is taking place, he passes the test. So God is also intervening in this situation, in their hearts here. So she goes back and tells her father about what she has experienced from Prophet Moses. So then there came to him one of the two women walking shyly, so they come back. after they tell their father, this is what we have experienced, this person, about this person. And she said, verily, my father calls you that he may reward you for having watered our flocks for us. So when he came to him and narrated the story, he said, fear you not. You have escaped from a people who are wrongdoers. And said one of them, the two women. Now he said that obviously the understanding is that when he came, he started to probably tell him his situation, his plight, how he came to town. They probably recognized from the way he's dressed that he doesn't look like he's a citizen of people around town. So he probably is like an immigrant or a migrant that recently came. And hearing this story, you could see again the deep relationship, again, something to note about a prophet and how he treats women is you will notice a loving relationship. So said one of them, the two women, oh, my father, hire him. Verily, the best of men for you to hire is the strong and trustworthy. You know, in modern day terms, one could say that she's kind of like hinting to her father that this is somebody that she's interested in, you might think, for marriage, of course. And he understands that. And so he says, I intend to wed one of these two daughters of mine to you on condition that you serve me for 8 years. This is not, by the way, some people understood it as the dowry for the marriage. This is more a condition for the marriage, given that he's an old person. He didn't want his daughters to be out of the area. But I would encourage you to read the commentary, several scholarly commentaries on these verses. But if you complete 10 years, it'll be a favor from you, but I intend not to place you under difficulty. If Allah wills, you will find me one of the righteous. Again, if Allah wills. So he's not, again, making a declaration, proclamation, but he's turning to God to be righteous. And you can tell from that statement, he's asking God to make him righteous. And you know, usually when someone's constantly, perpetually turning to God to be righteous, God is not going to say, no, I'm going to make you a wrongdoer, you know. So here again, it's the reliance of God to be righteous, not the reliance on the ego. He, Moses, said, that is settled between me and you, whichever of the two terms I fulfill. There will be no injustice to me, and Allah is surety over what we say. Remember when the brothers of Joseph made this kind of an agreement with their father before they took Joseph, and yet they violated it? Here, Moses responds again, kind of like Joseph again. He makes a condition, a term, an agreement, and he's asking God, to help him also fulfill it. Asking God to also be a witness, that he's not just speaking with totally neglectful of God is watching over him, but asking God to be a witness over the agreement that is taking place. Like all reformers, again, Moses was given the gift of insight and awareness, was made to observe and witness the negatives that he saw in kingdom of the Pharaoh, ugly consequences of what the Pharaoh and his soldiers were doing, how it impacted the children of Israel. Later, he surrendered to God's will and accepted the way things are and was nurtured by his new family of faith, knowing there's a higher wisdom that was yet outside his grasp. So Moses married one of the two women named Zipporah and spent the next 10 years working with her father. And he raised his family there. He went from a life of privilege, the prince of Egypt, where he learned about leadership, politics, government, to the solitary life of a shepherd. Now, when I mentioned that, some people understood it as the Zionists came and that Palestinians didn't have government, politics, stuff like that. No, they had government. It just, I'm talking about this story. The children of Israel at the time were oppressed for hundreds of years. It was not just a moment or two. And so they had no leadership, no politics, no government. And so it was not possible for them to advocate to create a leadership or a government or a political party to be able to fight off the Pharaoh. It was just not possible. He would have crushed them. So this is out of God's wisdom that he took Moses to learn these aspects, because he's preparing him, again, now to learn patience and to learn forbearance, because shepherd is very hard work. If you ever get the opportunity to talk to shepherds, you should spend some time with them, interview them. It's very, very hard work. Requires a lot of patience, requires a lot of forbearance. And so he needed him to learn not just these skills, but also to learn forbearance, to learn patience, to learn how he's going to be able to nurture his people and be able to build, you might say, his nation and be able to face the Pharaoh. Because you can't just shout. This is not an attack on protesters, but it is just suggesting you can't just shout in the streets and everybody goes back home and there is no, again, government that's going to, or leadership that's going to oppose. You have to build your platform, your power base, your leadership base to face oppressive governments. You have to build that. So beyond boycotts, we also need to brainstorm ways and look at what do we need, for example, to survive. We don't want to just go into boycotting Starbucks. We should also build a brand that engages in fair trade. Again, that's a coffee shop. And we brainstorm and we use like that money to build this movement, to build this leadership, politics, government. And then look at other areas, which businesses that we don't just need to boycott, but we should build someone, business, an area that we build that can oppose and not just telling people boycott, but also buy from this coffee shop and let's build this one. And we come up to an agreement that portion of that money will go to build this new leadership, new politics, new government. And we advocate and push that, and we do fair trade, not just at a domestic level, but at a global level, where we advocate not treating people as objects, not treating people, exploiting people. And we look to see which businesses, which corporations are acting in, out of bounds, violating others. And we create similar type of corporations, whatever it is, if it's soap, whatever it is. And again, portion of that is to create jobs, but then we give some of that money to build that government and politics and leadership. So we want to boycott, like we want to leave the Pharaoh, but we also want to nurture and build a new platform, a new government, a new leadership, a new politics that's going to bring these people to face these violators, transgressors, wrongdoers, and invite them to something that is more healthy, more fair for everyone in society. So instead of watching his people suffering and humiliated, he was made to ponder the wonders of God in the universe. Here he had time to feel the kind of awe that penetrates one's soul when one looks at the stars in the midst of darkness. This is based on reflections from some of the book Contemplation by Malik Badri. During his time in the Midian, Moses was a shepherd. Like many of the prophets, some argue that people are like sheep, and in order to guide people, nurture them, the prophets were trained by attending to sheep. Not all the prophets. Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, actually was a merchant, so he did business. But most of the prophets were taught, for example, how to deal with sheep, because you have to learn some of the skills of forbearance, learn some of the skills of patience, and being able to be a shepherd is some of the way that you can get that job. Like humans, sheep are animals that require constant care and attention. Shepherd must be constantly on alert, attending to the animal's safety and well-being. The whole flock must be watched over. The shepherd must guide them back if they stray. Moses' new profession increased his knowledge, wisdom, and insight. One might also speculate that it allowed him to heal. If you are like busy with your, physically busy, trying to not just survive, but trying to fulfill, your daily needs, then you're going to be at the end of the day extremely tired and exhausted and be able to think about things. So there's a time for you to revisit what happened to you. And you have to separate yourself from revisiting it, because at the time of when you're in pain, trying to interpret it when you are in pain, when you have not received sufficient knowledge from God, you might end up interpreting it wrong, and it might actually lead to more suffering. And this is, I believe, what happened to Zionists when they were persecuted and they escaped. It's how they interpreted their suffering. If you read some of the individuals, like they're the most famous one that you could think of on their end is Elie Wiesel. The way they interpreted their suffering increased and compounded their suffering. Because as soon as they left, they interpreted it based on their ego, based on their pain, based on their feelings, based on their trauma. They didn't really separate from their pain, from their suffering. Try to first, again, just live a new life and just give it time before they can look back at their trauma and then process it. They were processing it right then and there, and they were using their feelings, their pain, their being nearly near extermination to process their suffering. Here you could see again a period of 10 years where he's asked to be busy with this new profession. And, if again, sit with a shepherd, ask them about how their way of life, their life, you'll learn a lot of things from that. But here he's busy building a family, creating, again, new skill set, building new skill set. And this time takes his family, and he feels, like all immigrants, they want to go back to their motherland. As doesn't matter if there's a dictator there, you still, this is your area where you grew. This is where you have your roots. This is, your grandfather is buried, your great-grandfather is buried, your great-grandfather is buried, so that's where your roots are at, and the soul calls you back to where your roots are at. So Moses gathered his family together and made the long journey back to Egypt. But he got lost and was looking for guidance on how to find his way. Then, this is from a passage from the Quran, when Moses had fulfilled the term, and was traveling with his family, he saw a fire in the direction of Mount Tur. He said to his family, "Wait, I have seen a fire. Perhaps I may bring to you from there some news or a burning firebrand that you may warm yourselves." So he's thinking all along not to, again, process what he went through or how to take over the Pharaoh. He's accepting his new situation. And he's thinking about, again, fulfilling his needs. He needs to take care of his family. So he's going there looking for, again, just survival. trying to fulfill the needs of his family, accepting responsibility for his family. He doesn't leave his family away after 10 years and just say goodbye, and then he goes back to Egypt. But no, he's there showing, again, learning responsibility, being also, now a husband and a father. He's learning responsibility. He's learning how to take care of, the skills of being a father. And I had a video on nurturing commitment. So he's learning commitment, not just to her father. There was an agreement there, but also as a husband, as a father. Because you can't try to lead society and you have not nurtured commitment, you have not nurtured reason, you have not nurtured cognition of God, you've not nurtured, surrendering to God, So all of these things you are seeing Moses going through, nurturing. He's being nurtured to surrender, being nurtured to have cognition of God, nurturing commitment. You're seeing that nurturing taking place. If you go to my YouTube channel and look under the apologies, start here, under the playlist, I was going to say, and then look at here, the videos under here. You'll see again, freedom versus escapism. And then the different nurturing that take place for every prophet. You have to go through cognition of God, surrendering to God. And he went through, by accepting his new situation, he's being nurtured to surrender to God. Turning to God as the witness, and we saw that in the prayer that he made with the Father. Accepting again God as a witness, working with doing agreements with witnesses, nurturing good deeds. Again, saw what he's doing. Working as a shepherd. He's not just doing a job teaches you again that you have to be doing. You have to show you're a seed. You have to show that you're able to produce fruit. And that type of food that's going to be beneficial for you, your family, your community. You're able to nurture good deeds. Permission and consent. Again, you saw that within the marriage contract. Forgiveness, we saw that when he accidentally killed the prophet. Fleeing to God. We saw again when they were plotting and planning to kill him, he turns to God. Between humiliation and nurturing, he accepted being nurtured. Nurturing humility. Not that not that any prophet is egotistical, but again, going from being a prince to not being a shepherd. Nurturing reason, learning again wisdom, that he's looking there. And again, we saw nurturing commitment. We saw that in his marriage, the agreement with the Father, all, that is taking place. So he walks toward the fire, and as he did, he hears a voice. Blessed is whoever is in the fire and whoever is round about it. Blessed is whoever is in the fire. You can think of the fire as the person who's facing a trial and tribulation. It's supposed to remove impurities, elevate you, nurture you, give you wisdom, depending on your state. We're all seeds. Whoever is around about it, far removed is God from every imperfection. The Lord of all that exists. O Moses, verily it is I, God the Almighty, the All-Wise. Now he's being asked to revisit what he went through at a psychological, spiritual, emotional level. And God is going to help him process those events based on faith. The reason he misjudged before was he processed it based on his feelings, based on, what he's seeing. He misjudged. But now he's going to be facing that, and he's going to be receiving wisdom, inspiration, insight, morals from God on how to understand this suffering that he's going through, and how that understanding is going to help remove first the suffering, because the suffering has to first move from your heart. You have to have the right interpretation, the right lens, and then it, from once it gets into your heart, it has to flow then to your mind. It flows to your emotions, to your feelings, and then you start to open up and see the whole world. And you're able then to build a whole new world. But right now, throughout his whole stay in Midian, Moses was under the watchful eyes of God, being nurtured and prepared for prophethood. Now that he was trained and nurtured, he was ready to change the oppression he witnessed to liberate the Israelites. Now that he had nurtured himself, he was nurtured under a prophet. His next task was to train and nurture his people so that he could liberate them. And what does this mean for us? As Moses is called to the fire, so is he called to prophethood. Again, we read, blessed is whoever is in the fire, whoever is round about it. Far removed is God from every imperfection, the Lord of all that exists. O Moses, verily it is I, God the Almighty, the All-Wise. Moses, upon him peace, was a strong military leader, but he did not wage war against the Pharaoh. Again, you have to build a new government, new politics. You can't just go it alone. You want to make sure you first are also go through that nurturing process. So you're no longer a seed. You now are strong mentally, emotionally, socially, spiritually to be able to face this like wrongdoing system. The scholar Reza Aslan has noted that people are less inclined to hurt the people they know. So he's talking about here relationships. I disagreed with that. By this measure, the solution to Islamophobia is relationships. That's both true and false. But first, we must ask, what type of relationships? After all, people do hurt people they know. Most cases of rape are between people who know one another. And domestic violence is one of the leading causes of injury to women in the United States and beyond. Oppression cannot be fought by simply having dinner and being kind to your neighbors, who are sometimes also your oppressors. Like, in Gaza, they used to watch them when they were being bombed and celebrate and cheer. I'm talking about Israel. The Israelis, who are sitting here knowing that right there is a concentration camp. They're not thinking that this is wrong. We went through a concentration camp, reflecting, turning to God. They're thinking it's okay. A case again in point is the Chapel Hill shootings, where 3 youths were shot dead execution style by their neighbor, who apparently knew them and yet still hated them, apparently for their religion. He knew them, yet the father of 2 of the victims said that the killer had brought a gun to their house before and threatened them with it. Healthy boundaries within relationships are necessary for coexistence and harmony. There was not a healthy boundary to protect the 3 young people from their neighbor. This lesson, excuse me, can also be found in the story of Pharaoh who kills his wife, Asya. According to Islamic teachings, Asya is a role model for all women, even though she was killed by her husband, the Pharaoh. Yet the Pharaoh believed he was a deity and that everyone should look up to him. He saw others as objects to exploit and enslave, acted like judge, jury, executioner, and did whatever it took to maintain power. Without bounds, transgressed all bounds. There was no one to call him to account for his cruelty or slaughter of others. He acted with impunity, no accountability to any rule or power. He knew his wife very well, but this didn't stop him from killing her, since he believed he had the right to do it, and no one can stop him when doing it. Perhaps he even believed he was defending himself. The oppressed, like the Jews during Moses' time, find they must resist abuse of power to liberate themselves. Repeatedly throughout history, religion has been used as a justification and a tool when fighting wars. Some of these have been wars of liberation, while others have been a distortion of religious teachings. And I have a video on here regarding this recently as an example. This here, recent videos. It's about all criminal interpretation of scripture are condemned because religion becomes now a tool or a weapon that people use to harm others. So it's, again, uses a distortion of religious teachings. So it is now when some Muslims distort and twist Islamic teachings to promote, for example, themselves as reformers. They follow that same, again, psychology. Did you go through that nurturing process? I gave you like some steps of the nurturing process while harming others in the process. One cannot trivialize or discount the valid grievances that many Muslims have toward a powerful country today. An article by Nafiz Ahmed called Unworthy Victim states Western wars have killed 4 million Muslims since 1990. Much of this is the result of unchecked power. Again, we're like outraged by October 7th, but we pardoned ourselves for this. But there are other powers that are corrupt and unchecked, among them many Arab and Muslim leaders in many areas in the Middle East. So I'm not going to pretend again that Muslims don't have work to do. That's not the aim. It's not, I am better than you. It is simply giving a way of how we interpret the stories that we tell ourselves, the story that we tell others, and recognizing the wrongdoers, the transgressors, and those who are true to themselves and true to God. It's ludicrous to blame everything, of course, on the West, just as it's ludicrous to blame everything on Islam. Clash between the West and Islam is really all in our minds, a way to avoid looking at the real issues. These are who has power, what sort of power, what is it being used for? How's that power being used? We saw how Moses used his power at the well. These issues cannot be wished away by getting to know each other. Many influential U.S. colonists travel to Arab and Muslim lands, engage, share meals, and discuss issues. Yet, what type of relationship do they establish with the residents? I don't know, some of these individuals started changing their ways. So I don't want to allow people to grow. You don't want to make them always picking on something. You could see that they are in the process of maybe reflecting that maybe their participation in the Iraq war that contributed to the rise of ISIS. Chris Hedges describes these false friends well in his article on Truth Dig, the Treason of Intellectuals. So again, power, who has power? What kind of power? How is it being used? So it's not just military power, because a lot of times we're just looking at military, but it's also intellectuals. How are they using that power? Knowledge is power. How are they using that power? Are they using it to justify, rationalize, to intellectualize oppression? Try to make it reasonable when it's not, when it's based on distortions. And I called out one intellectual recently who was making a case for what the Zionists did, claiming that people are just envious of them. And you responded to him, but the meaning of light unto the nations means, because the individual seems to be, again, using intellectualism, but in a treason way. totally like, or not overlooking the fact of how Israel is harming people, exploiting, treating them as objects, exploiting them in the Middle East. Literally, in their own words, seeking to destabilize the region. And I had a video on that. The plot, a new plan for destabilizing the Gulf. Talks about the clean break. So literally, they're working to destabilize the region. We didn't see that with Moses on a piece. We didn't see he was working to destabilize anything in the land of the Midian. Another individual, C.J. Werleman, I believe, he equates the language and arguments of Christian crusaders, 21st century US, UK neoconservatism. How many conversations, discussions, and relationships have these commentators had with Muslims and Arabs? What source of relationships are they? It's not like we're not talking with each other. As I will show in coming. They literally went and killed the negotiator. They are talking with people. They are visiting the Middle East. They keep going to the Middle East and going to the Middle East, and they meet and they sit and they have dinner and they drink water and they drink coffee. But what kind of power? Who has power? How is that power being used? Dominate, supremacy, threaten, control, subjugate, exploit, objectify. That's what we're seeing. That's what we're witnessing. And we're also seeing, again, the cheerleaders of war. We saw them literally when Netanyahu came again, another trip to Congress, where people are giving him these nonstop, standing ovations and acting like cheerleaders for war, cheerleaders for genocide. Moses, upon him peace, went through many tests in order to show us the inner reality of his struggles. We're all seeds. All of us, not just those they bury, we're all seeds. And what comes out of us is what kind of seed we really are. So he helps us to reflect on our own inner selves. His were difficult and severe trials through which he surrendered to God's will, allowing God to be his teacher. The test of the Midian was a particularly beautiful test, and many of us face a similar one when we immigrate to another land, and we need to establish new relationships. We can look at the relationship Moses, upon him peace, established and ask, what's in our own heart? Did we run from Pharaoh physically, yet does he still lurk in our heart and soul? For quite some time, people literally looked up to the West. And not to say that there's nothing good to look up into, like Western education and stuff, but they overlooked the fact that, again, I showed you like 4 million people were killed. They overlooked the fact that the West has a habit of pardoning itself for every war crime, every transgression, every wrongdoing. Slavery, it pardons itself. This, it pardons itself. It doesn't care about, like, if they're supporting Israel, like you say, if Israel doesn't exist, we have to invent an Israel. Joe Biden. Well, why don't you, if you're doing this out of genuine human concern, as you claim, why don't you say that to the African Americans? If a country for African Americans doesn't exist, we have to create one and then just carve out part of America and give it to African Americans, give them the land. That if your claim is you were doing this because of the oppression they face in Nazi Germany, and you're not able to convince, let's just say, Germany to give half of their land to Israel and say, here's part of Germany, here's part of Israel, and now you have a land. If your claim it's compassion and desire for security, well, you got people that you oppressed right here, right in your own backyard. Again, we saw how Prophet Moses nurtured commitment to his family, to his children, taking care of them. But you got people here that are being oppressed. Why don't you give them land and say, here's land, you need to now We need to create some like African American state right here. Why don't you do the same for the Native Americans? Say, given the history of what Native Americans have faced, if a land does not exist for them, we need to carve out part of America and just give it exclusively to the Native Americans and let them, have their own state. Why just, Zionists? Why not African Americans? Why not Native Americans? So it's, again, we come up with that treason of intellectuals. We come up with justifications and rationalizations that when they are put to the test, they don't reconcile. You've been, until this day, fighting nonstop to make any reparations to the Native Americans and the African Americans. So it seems really problematic that you're claiming that it's all out of the compassion of your heart that you're really trying to support the state of Israel, that you really are just concerned about Israelis. No, you want to destabilize the region. You want to put a foothold in the region, and you want to do this to steal the natural resources of the Middle East. Just be honest about why you're supporting the state of Israel. It has nothing to do with all of these nonsense that you keep putting on the table that just does not fly. Again, when God places another human being who's weak and unprotected before us, do we fulfill their needs without asking for anything in return? That's not how the West acts. Or do we exploit them? Do we justify their oppression and persecution because we were once persecuted? When we in the Western society came here, for example, they fled persecution. They came, to Europe. What happened to the earlier residents of this land? I don't just exclusively, again, speak about just when Jews fled persecution or when European Americans fled, persecution from Europe. I also raise this again to my own community because, again, you're trying to nurture society. You let them also know that when you come into these lands and you're escaping persecution, put on the lens of the Quran that we use to understand and to see reality. You're being tested, and God is going to place before you someone weaker than you, and reflect on how you are treating people that God is going to place before you, because that's a divine test. Who are weaker than you or unprotected in those lands. So it's a question that we have to reflect on. Moses' lessons and trials teach us to look inward and ask ourselves, first and foremost, who lurks in our heart and soul? The first medicine that faith offers to the oppressed is not to rise up in arms and put oneself in power. You have to go through that nurturing process. Instead, it's to remove Pharaoh from one's own souls. Don't be a Pharaoh to others. So when you want to look at a political candidate, like right now, either in the US or outside the US, you want to look at and see how are they with their family? Are they committed? Talking about, are they committed to their family, to their children? Are they there taking care of their children, their spouses? Do they have experiences of commitment? Are they doing good deeds? Are they people that are serving their community and society? Like he was a shepherd. He was working for 10 years just as a shepherd, just doing good deeds. Do they have experiences of being humble? Like he had to work as a job as a shepherd. So I one time posted a video of a man who was, like he drives a garbage truck, I was thinking about how this person is humble, that he's, it's very difficult, by the way, to drive a garbage truck. You're not looking down at the person. You're just showing that, look at this individual, that he's willing to take on a job, benefit, himself, pay his bills, take care of his, family, still he's doing something because you have to go through that process of where you just surrender and accept, and you nurture discipline, you nurture doing good deeds, nurture taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, taking care of others. If you're not able to do that, how are you going to be a leader taking care of, your community or taking care of a country? So if you look at Netanyahu, just based on just what we just addressed right now, I mean, again, the evidence is clear as day. He cheated on his spouse, committed adultery, Netanyahu. He committed adultery. He was not committed. He does not have any experiences of nurturing commitment, nurturing cognition of God, nurturing doing good deeds, nurturing humility. Doesn't have any of these experiences that we saw the prophets went through. Neither did Trump. I don't think also Kamala Harris did. So you want to, when you're looking at a political leader, you want to look and see what kind of a seed that person is. You want to check throughout their history and throughout their life. What kind of a person was this person? Were they able to just do good work, take care of themselves, take care of their families, accept responsibility, accept accountability, accept correction? As Moses accepted correction from God, except working under others. He was now first he's the prince of Egypt, now he's working under Prophet Shuaib. A simple position like a shepherd. Are they able to do that? And so people, again, they misunderstood when I pointed at the garbage truck. They were thinking of it. This is how they interpreted. I work as a developer, and I am seeing in myself better than somebody who's working as like they're driving a garbage truck. I don't see myself better as someone driving a garbage truck. My dad, at one point in his life, he took a job as a janitor. So I'm not looking down. This is nurturing, again, humility. He had a better job when he was in Palestine. When he came here, it was very hard for him to find a job. He had to take a job as a janitor. So there's absolutely nothing with working, again, nurturing good deeds, taking care of your family, taking care of your kids, trying your best, the resources you have and what you have. So again, to do good deeds to the best that you can. You're probably going to be exhausted and tired, and then, your body's so tired, you're just going to go to sleep. And the physical exhaustion of the work that you're doing. But they're able to surrender to God, to surrender to their situation that they're in, because they're being prepared to lead and fight wrongdoing. But if you can't, you can only be on top and be served, and someone serving you, and just be, going from one town to the next, eating dinner, drinking coffee, doing this, and you're having these, negotiations, and they're leading nowhere. Why? Because what kind of seeds are they? They lived a life of privilege where someone is always serving them. Always, they have lives where they're always being served. They're always giving orders, telling people what to do. And they were always violating whatever agreement, whether it's a marriage agreement, like, Trump wasn't committed to the first, second, even the third marriage that he's in. If someone is not committed in their own marriage multiple times, should this person be chosen as a leader? Because I don't see, when I'm looking for somebody, I say, do I see commitment? Was this person committed? And then you also look to see, again, were they able to take a simple job and just work a simple job and serve others? I don't see that. And some of the leaders that we're being asked to choose from. This is why I'm going Green Party. Again, it's to remove the pharaoh from one's own soul. Don't be a pharaoh to others. As with Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace and blessings, one of the first things prescribed for Moses and his followers was prayer When he came to the fire, a voice was heard, O Moses, verily I am thy Lord. Therefore in my presence put off thy shoes, thou art in the sacred valley. Tua, verily I am God. There is no deity but I, so serve thou me only and establish regular prayer for celebrating my praise. Verily the hour is coming, my design is to keep it hidden, for every soul to receive its reward by measure of its endeavor. Therefore, let not such as believe not therein, but follow their own lust. Again, you could see it's not just sex. When they say here lust, it isn't just sex. Don't think about it as just sex, but they're following their own lust in that they come into a new land, they act like Nazis. In their own words, their own diaries, they'll act like Nazis. So they're not open to being, for example, shepherds in Palestine, learning from Palestinians, working with Palestinians as, shepherds and accepting a new, world order being nurtured and how to accept coexistence. Because you can fight persecution, but according to you, if all you faced is persecution, you don't have a know-how of how to promote coexistence. You need to learn from the Palestinians how to promote coexistence. You need to learn from them because they have been living in coexistence with Christians and Jews before the Zionists came. So if your aim is to run away from persecution and to coexist in the region, then you should have humbled yourself, nurtured surrender, accepted being shepherds in the area, and learned from them how coexistence happens. Because they teach life. We Palestinians, we teach life. We have the know-how. But that's not what you came for. You didn't come to coexist in the region. You came to destabilize, in your own words, destabilize the realm. So again, therefore, let not such as believe not therein, but follow their own lusts. Divert thee therefrom, lest thou perish. God doesn't benefit from our prayers or our remembrance of him. So prayers benefit us in our hearts. They allow the light of faith to increase and thus protect us from allowing Pharaoh to enter. Here, I would like to reflect on two names of God. The first is As-Sami', the all-hearing, who hears all that comes from the lips, passed through the minds, or is felt by the hearts. According to Sheikh Thyself Bayrak al-Jirahi al-Haviti, As-Sami' hears the rustling of leaves in the wind, the footsteps of the ants, the atoms moving through the void. The other name is Al-Basir, the all-seeing, who sees all that has passed, all that there is, and all there will be. Oppressed are often silenced by the cheerleaders of war, an abusive power, and they may have a strong desire for a witness to bear their pain and suffering. As I said about the turning to God, the witness. Malcolm X, said, the power respects power. And indeed, healthy power respects everyone. Like we saw with Moses, he respected the two women near the well. He respected their father. Still an old man, he could have again knocked him out, beat his daughters. He had that type of strength and took over like their area. However, abusive power only respects power that will hold it in check. For this reason, when one finds themselves weak and those in power are abusive and their leaders are corrupt, one must connect to the all-seeing, the all-hearing to seek his guidance. God spoke directly to Moses, and Moses was told the wisdom behind everything that happened to him. All of this was in preparation for his mission in life as prophet and messenger of God. This was the first sign for Pharaoh. And throw your stick. When he saw it moving as if it were a snake, he turned in flight, being afraid, looked not back. and look not back. It was said, O Moses, draw near, fear not. Verily you are one of those who are secure. Another sign for Pharaoh, move thy hand into thy bosom, and it will come forth white without stain or harm, and draw thy hand close to thy sides to guard against fear. Those are the two credentials from thy Lord to Pharaoh and his chiefs, for truly they are people rebellious and wicked. Again, oppositional, defiant, transgressing all bounds, agreements, killing negotiator. This is literally how they function. The staff that Moses used as a shepherd is turned into a snake to illustrate to Moses that God is not limited and that one should use these means while relying on God. Although Moses was very strong on the outside, what we see through this dialogue with God is his humility, his humanity, his vulnerability. He was afraid. He wasn't standing up thinking like, Tarzan, wrestling with God. He was afraid. He was feeling vulnerable. A healthy person doesn't see themselves as a deity who can take on the world. Again, I did the one on nurturing humility, but is instead in touch with their weaknesses and vulnerability. Talking about not weaknesses as in like people, again, they misinterpreted it as lust. I don't know why people's mind always goes south. But weaknesses, and again, he recognized, someone's going to throw a bomb at you. Definitely you're going to be afraid, scared. There, some of these bombs, if you've been watching what's going on in Gaza, it's heartbreaking just seeing some of these bombs that are being hitting the people, the Palestinians. Just heartbreaking to see that. It also shows us that when Moses, upon him peace, faced Pharaoh, he faced him not by relying on himself or the means in his hand, like the bombs, you might say. Here he had a staff. He wasn't relying on like his military, like some of the spokespeople for Israel were saying, we got nuclear warheads. So they're relying on who? You keep, referring to the Bible, but at the same time, they're relying on what? They're relying on their weapons. They're relying on their nuclear warheads. Their staff, you might say. Their military machinery. Instead, he relied on God, commanded by him and protected by him as he went to speak to the Pharaoh. The key is Moses' humility and vulnerability. Indeed, Moses never forgot the man he accidentally slew in air. Again, why am I mentioning this? Because wrongdoers pardon themselves. The U.S. forgot that it killed 4 million people. We're just talking from 1990. We're not even going beyond, before 1990. Killed 4 million plus people. And it's sitting here outraged at 9/11. 9/11. As soon as like October 7th happened, they were like, October 7th equal 9/11. It's like, hey, wait a second here. Did you forget you just killed 4.5 and even more million people? Yeah, they did. They pardoned themselves. So this is what I'm referring to about memory. But here you see that he didn't pardon himself. Did we see this in the Western world? Did we see this in the Israelis? Where they were like, we acted like Nazis when we came into Palestine. In their diaries, forget what other people say. In their own diaries, they said we acted like Nazis. Did they remember that? They remember the Stern and, the terrorist groups that were created at the time when they fled to do onto Palestinians what was done onto them. The terrorism that was taking place in their name. No, they forgot it all. They forgot it. They just threw it behind their back. But compare how they forgot every wrongdoing they've done and how Moses is standing here before God as God is telling him to go to the Pharaoh. And he's reminding God and reminding himself, but I have slain a man among them, and I fear lest they slay me. Did he forget? So they had this video. It was, if you look in my post, it was by Norman Finkelstein, but they're talking about the importance of memory. But it's a two-way street. They're like October 7th, but we forgot everything before October 7th. That's not memory. That's a distortion of memory. And that's how oppressors think. They only can remember when somebody hurt them, but they have absolutely no recollection of anything negative or harmful or abusive or wrongdoing that they done to others. Point of this miscalculation and this judgment is to help us to differentiate the Pharaoh from the Moses, those who have correct memory analysis and those who have a distorted memory analysis. Moses, upon him peace, had an inner life that shows he was aware of his weaknesses and was a deeply humble person. He's very strong, remember, but his weakness was, again, he needed to be nurtured as a shepherd, not to misapply that strength. That was the weakness. He even argued that perhaps he was not the most qualified person for the job, but God had selected him to also protect him. Sometimes you're facing somebody very bad and they're going to, he worried he's going to go to the kingdom, tell them about, what he's doing, and he's going to remind him, well, you slayed someone amongst us. So God is going to teach him that, you went through the process of accountability and repairing the harm and being nurtured under a prophet. So he went through that. So this is also important for us, like when sometimes people mention others, and we mentioned that with, for example, George Floyd. You have to look and see the whole picture. Like when you look at the whole picture, for example, there was a part of his life. We're not saying that obviously he miscalculated. In terms of George Floyd, he was impacted by society and he committed crimes. But he also regretted those crimes. So he also paid for the crime based on society's established rules, that this is what you need to pay for the crime. And in his own words, he started to then realize that what he did was wrong. And he started to want to change the way that he previously lived. So you have to make room and open doors for people like that, not to be held. Once you see them on their own, like they're changing the way they saw the world before, and now they're realizing crime is not profitable or is not the way they want to live their life. You have to open doors for these individuals to be forgiven and to start a new chapter in their life as someone different. Because that's what faith is all about. Some Zionists, for example, likewise, they started off promoting Zionism, and I mentioned some voices, but then they later also had that moment of where they realize that this system that they're supporting is actually an oppressive system, and they go through that process of challenging themselves, and they come out of it, and they start speaking against Zionism. So you want to also open a chapter if you see that they go through that nurturing process. I gave you some of the things to look for. Maybe they're not nurturing cognition of God, but you could see that in the sense that they're not promoting wrongdoing. They're not promoting violation of agreements, kill the negotiator. They're not promoting kill others, exploiting others, treating others as objects, as slaves, just subjugating them. So those kind of things, usually when people don't have maybe a correct understanding of God, still you look to see, do they act like I am the God? Like I am the Pharaoh, and they're promoting supremacy. Again, so try to look for that as a sign of individuals as they are growing in the new chapter they are building and nurturing in their life. We will certainly strengthen thy arm through thy brother, and invest you both with authority, so that they shall not be able to touch you. With our signs shall you true you too, as well as those who follow you. One of also the weaknesses of Moses was he used to stutter. And truth, it needs to be, because again, if you see like some of the treason of intellectuals, you want to make sure that you present it in the best way. That you don't want to kind of like go there and be stuttering, and you've got these treason of intellectuals that are going to be like cutting and pasting, kind of like brainwashing people with all of this nonsense, making it look like intellectual. We need somebody also who has a way with how they speak. Like, his brother Harun, was very eloquent in speech. I'm not talking about as gentle, but he had a way with speaking. He was very eloquent, knowledgeable, eloquent, and he was able to make the speech. Like as I mentioned it once in one of the posts, like he can separate truth from falsehood. His speech was eloquent in the sense, not that it's just beautified and sugarcoats. That's usually what people who cut and paste do, but he can separate the truth from falsehood. He had that kind of eloquence of speech that can kind of like break through the treason of intellectualism and help people see truth from falsehoods. So God directed Moses to go still to the Pharaoh because he chose him and he put him through this fire, trials and tribulations, just like Prophet Abraham was thrown into the fire. And it's meant again to identify that this is the person that I'm choosing to lead the community. He has transgressed all bounds. Again, something about a wrongdoer, as I said, they don't have red lines, cannot follow commitments, they cannot follow agreements, like we saw with the agreement between Moses and the Father. This is all identifying to us that he's a just prophet, the kind of seed that he is. To varying degrees, we all have a Pharaoh and a Moses within. The dominant voice within is based on our relationship with those in power and those who are unprotected. If we obsess only over our security and our cheerleaders for those in power, as we've seen in Congress for Netanyahu, then we are Pharaoh or Pharaoh's yes man. Again, this helps us to interpret reality. This is what we see when we see all these Congress people clapping for Netanyahu, the Pharaoh and Pharaoh's yes man. If we seek power and are obsessed with our own pain and suffering, we're talking about the Zionists, like October 7, bring the hostages home, October 7, bring the hostages home, October 7, bring the hostages for like 10, 11 months. Nothing about what happened for October 7th. I don't care. And nothing about the genocide taking in Gaza. I don't care. Then we are the Israelites who fought for selfish motives, a Pharaoh one. If, however, we align ourselves with those in power and hold them in check and align with those who are oppressed and support the oppressed, and the dominant voice within us is Moses. We're seeing, for example, talking about align as a support, align as in now you're creating, for example, political party like the Green Party, or you're creating a political group, and you're going to hold those in power in check. And you're going to be working to listen, not to speak, but to listen to those who are oppressed and support those who are oppressed here as well as abroad. You want to make sure you have fair trade. As again, he went abroad, Moses, like into a new land, and he was able to work fair trade. Trade, and his services to others. Serving people, helping people, taking care of people. He's able to treat them as human beings, coexist with them. Because you can't be yelling, I don't like migrants here, they're taking our job. And yet you're plotting and planning to destabilize their countries. You can't reconcile those two voices. So again, it's growing the Moses within. And I'm going to stop here. I'll add some links to the YouTube description that talked about growing the Moses within. Some of the reflection points that I mentioned also in here are in those posts on Facebook. You can look at them, and I appreciate feedback, constructive feedback about this project. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.